Okay guys, today we're going to be taking a look at Bitcoin, and with Bitcoin breaking the $30,000 support line, does this mean that we are entering a bear market? Guys, as we get into this video and we dive deep into Bitcoin, if you find it useful and informative, hit that like button. I really do appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you've subscribed, hit the bell and tap on all notifications and you won't miss a single update. Guys, with this said, let's jump down and get into everything Bitcoin. So I'm going to actually start things off here on the monthly chart, as I've seen a few comments on some of the videos talking about how the monthly clearly indicates that we are going to $20,000. Now, I don't see the same as some of the comments. I actually see that we are oversold here on the monthly chart in a very much a similar way that we are on the weekly chart and the daily chart. Everything on the stochastic relative strength index has reached the oversold situation. Of course, if you take off the stochastic and you throw on the relative strength index, it does show a slightly different story on the monthly view. It shows us at 55, just above that midway point. And when we take a look at the wave 2 correction, we can see, of course, that we were about 49 before we started to really go into wave 3. So although this does seem quite high from a relative strength index perspective, actually this is actually pretty decent. And again, it's always good to marry this up with the more price sensitive stochastic relative strength index when we are trading sideways, as Bitcoin has been doing. So indicating that actually the stochastic is saying that we are ultimately oversold for Bitcoin here, and we should be looking to potentially come out of this sideways trade shortly. With this being said, am I feeling that we are a bear market? I still think we are actually in a bull market, although we are in a correction wave. Now, obviously, some people may call these bear phases or a bear market within a bull market, or a bear cycle within a bull market, whatever you want to call it. Ultimately, it's a correction wave in itself, as we have these 5 impulse waves to the upside. Now, in order to go down to 20k, this is something I've been speaking about a bit recently, is first of all, the price has to go up in order to have enough room to push the price back down again from a relative strength index and a stochastic relative strength index point of view. And this is something that you're seeing on the hourly chart, and we're going to get into that in a moment as we dive through all these different time frames. But here on the monthly, I just wanted to kind of point out that we are actually at an oversold situation for the stochastic relative strength index on this particular monthly chart. Now, when we jump down into our weekly chart, we get a very similar story, right? Let me just bring this back into view so you can see the 5 impulse waves, but we can also see that we are at 0.12 on that stochastic relative strength index, right? We were right down there at the rock bottom on the weekly chart. So if we are expecting the, for several weeks to fall down lower, we first of all have to expect a couple of weeks to push the price up before you can come down. Now, obviously, when I talk about this, people think that ultimately it's going to happen instantaneously, right? It's going to happen overnight, price will go up and then it'll fall down. That's not what we're talking about. This is a weekly chart. It's going to take weeks to go up and then weeks to go pushed back down again. If it were to go back down, there's obviously no guarantee of that. Right now, what I'm looking at here from a technical point of view is an oversold Bitcoin that is being almost put down all the way to 0, right? And we take a look at all these other low points in the charts. We look at the wave 2 correction where it bottomed out down here during March of 2020. And the stochastic relative strength index was at 8.2. Okay, so a significantly different scenario, although everyone was really panicking and everything was being sold off during that March crash of 2020. Right now, the price movement and the momentum of Bitcoin is significantly lower than it was in March of 2020. That is a significant thing to just note. And again, when we take a look at where we were in December of 2018, the stochastic relative strength index was at 0.4. We are now lower than we were when we actually finished the bull run from 2018. 17 and 18. So that's also something you've got to bear in mind, that ultimately where we are right now for Bitcoin on the weekly chart is incredibly low and is incredibly oversold. So the price expectation of 20k is really hard to push when you understand the data that sits in the background. Right now, it looks like you have to push the price up if you want to go down any lower. So well worth pointing out, and again, the expectations, guys, is nothing instantly. It's going to take weeks, specifically when we're talking about a weekly chart or a monthly chart. When we actually take this down into that next level of the daily, right, this is where things start to actually pick up a little bit more. You can see obviously the sideways trading that's been going on over here. Now, obviously, you have a little bit of a kick up right in the middle here. So we obviously have the relative stochastic relative strength index, right, currently at 7.5 on the daily chart. So the daily chart obviously could potentially pull down the weekly chart from that 0.12 that it is on to maybe even 0.05, right? So 0.05 could be on the cards for the weekly if you continue this motion to the downside. Obviously, the daily chart is higher than 0, but is still oversold because anything lower than 20 on the stochastic relative strength index is oversold. So right now, again, we have an oversold Bitcoin in the same way that we do on our monthly chart, the same that we do on our weekly chart, and we'd have this also on our daily chart, although the daily chart is a slightly little bit higher, that we could potentially push down a little bit lower on our daily chart. That will affect a very small amount of our weekly, okay? And again, this becomes really apparent when we take a look at the hourly. All of these charts, they all compound together for those bigger views. So where we talk about a weekly chart and it's right down there at 0.12, ultimately it's got 0.12 to go down to complete zero, right? But the probability of that is incredibly low. And we look at what's going on here on the daily chart, and we see the probability of going down lower is also incredibly low. We look at the history of the selling climax when we came out of the high areas here, where we pulled down originally to these low areas. The stochastic relative strength index was pretty much at 0 at this point. And you can see every kind of major pullback, it pulled it right down to these same levels, right? Over and over and over again. It repeats itself. So right now, when you're all the way down here, are you expecting the price to push up, or are you expecting the price to push down? Obviously, my expectations are the price to push up on this daily chart, and daily candles should start appearing here in the other direction rather than red. Obviously, we have to understand what's also going on our hourly chart, because the hours make up the days make up the weeks, and the weeks make up the months. So obviously, as we take a look through all these different timelines, we obviously started at the top end. We know that we're oversold on all these charts so far. Let's take a look at what is going on our hourly view. So when we get into Bitcoin here on the hourly, there's a couple of trend lines that I've drawn on. There's obviously downward trend here, and we were tracking this for a while. And over the weekend, we broke out of this downward trend. We pushed the price up. We back tested this and turned it into a support line. And then over a Monday, we actually got some volume coming in, pushing the price back inside this channel to the downside. Okay, it was that selling volume that was clearly indicated by traders that were pushing the price down, because over the weekend, the retail investors who were operating, we pushed the price out of this channel, we pushed the price up, only to have it pushed back inside this channel in this downward trend line, basically on Monday. And this is an indication of, again, traders manipulating the market and pushing things down. And again, what we look at is what's going on from a point of view across like the stock to flow model. And I'll get into all that kind of stuff in a moment, with how the price of Bitcoin is so undervalued against so many other models out there. So right now, obviously, we are testing now the upper bound of the previous resistance of 30K. And that's now the new resistance. And obviously, we take a look at that stochastic, right? Again, it's always important to understand where your stochastic relative strength index is, where your relative strength index is as well. And right now, we're overbought. So the expectation, guys, should be that we are going to push the price down on this hourly chart. Okay, and these are micro movements, guys, because we obviously are aware when we take a look at the bigger picture and we go up to those bigger time frames that the price will move up long term, because it can't go down any lower, right? It's already at those ridiculously low levels. As we said, it's lower than it was during the March crash of 2020. It's lower than it was after the previous bear market from a stochastic relative strength index. So therefore, we are going to be looking to push the price up long term. So you get all these micro movements on these smaller time frames that can scare people, the hourly moves. But ultimately, you know, this, if you just zoom out, you can see what goes on with this stochastic relative strength index on these small time frames. They're constantly bouncing around up and down, right? Every hour, it's kind of moving around all the time. So when we take a look at this, obviously being up the top here, overbought, we are going to push the price down. Okay. Now, obviously, depending on the volume that comes in, depends on how we handle that, right? So from retail investors, how many of you are going to be shaken out when you look at it breaking this 30K level? Obviously, loads of news articles out there telling you that Bitcoin's going down to 23K, 20K, whatever it may be. But from a retail investor point of view, it's important that we understand what's going on in a longer term view. Obviously, we talk a lot on this channel about the dangers of leverage. So again, I'm not a financial advisor. Chris is not a financial advisor, and we always recommend that you seek proper financial advice, etc. But it's important that we also acknowledge that using leverage is going to be putting you in a much higher risk position because you can be liquidated in situations like this, where we are in time frames like the hourly, where it's being heavily manipulated, the price is being pushed down. You can see it here and being pushed back inside these channels, etc. But yet the daily views, the weekly views, the monthly views are all actually telling us that the price is likely to push up longer term towards the second half of this year going into 2022, that actually hodling is a very good strategy. Hold on to your Bitcoin that you own. If you're using leverage, you cannot do this. Ultimately, you'll get liquidated after a position or once the price is pushed down so far, you will get liquidated, right? And you will lose your money. But if you actually own the Bitcoin and you own the keys to your crypto, that isn't ever going to happen. So it's important that we obviously acknowledge the risks of leverage, specifically in a volatile market like this as well. So guys, my expectations on the short term, and I mean short term, over the next few days, potentially into the next week, will be that Bitcoin will bounce around a little bit. We obviously have this downward trend that was most likely is going to be a problem for us for a little while here. We'll push the price down. Now we obviously have the volume, the momentum's dropped off, so we're going to fall down really soon. Probably by the time this video has gone out, we've probably already started the decline towards our lower area of trend line. Okay, so this trend line that's been intact for a while, hopefully it will hold. If it does, we should just bounce off here. Find support at about 28.5K. And the expectations, guys, have always been that July will see a low of about 28K. And I think Plan B was talking about this a while back. I think we even did a video on how the low would potentially be 28K, high potentially 45K. Or 40K, something like that. So check that video out if it's of interest to you. We talk about the potential for going down as low as 28K during July. So looks like we'll probably ride this down towards this 28.5, potentially lose that momentarily before finally breaking out of here. Now we look at the time frames, guys. We look at how long this channel comes down until it really gets into a real fine knit position. Basically, it's the end of July, and something by the end of July should have happened here for Bitcoin. And the expectations in line with our daily chart, our weekly chart, our monthly chart is the price will move up, because in order to push down, if that is what is genuinely going to happen, and we are genuinely in a bear market, which I do not think we are, but if we are, the price will first have to move up if it's going to go down to those newer low areas, going into like 24K or going down as low as 20K. And if it goes any lower than I think it's 14K, it completely invalidates anything to do with a bull market, right? So and it's at that point that we would basically be saying, yeah, sure, we are in a bull market or bear market, right? But right now, for me, we are definitely all bull. There is a lot of data here to suggest that we're in a bull market rather than a bear market, although we're in a correction wave right now. And the other thing that I want to kind of point out is the artificial intelligence from 𝗖𝗢𝗠𝗏 is also indicating some extreme fear now with Bitcoin, which was not there yesterday. We actually dropped down an entire rating down to C2 overall. Everything here in the artificial intelligence is indicating that Bitcoin is going to be in for a bit of a rocky road, a rough time for the next couple of days or so, I would have thought. But again, the expectations are in line with that daily, in line with that weekly and monthly, that it isn't going to last forever, because it simply cannot continue like this for much longer, and the price will eventually get corrected to the upside. My original expectations were the end of July, beginning of August. That hasn't really changed. The technicals are indicating that we should start to see a reversal, a significant reversal in around that time frame. So we've almost got all the way through this, and if you've been able to hodl all the way through, then congratulations, you're doing incredibly well. The other thing that's also worth pointing out is that stock to flow model. I know that Coin Bureau did a fantastic video on explaining the stock to flow model, everything about it, and obviously it's up for a lot of criticism at the moment as to whether or not this is invalidated or not invalidated. I still feel that this is actually a pretty solid model. I even understand how it's been made, all of that kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, as an analyst, this is still I'm still in line with the thinking of this particular model. And of course, taking a look at the stock to flow deflection also gives you a pretty good, unique perspective on the value of Bitcoin. It's never been this low for a very, very long time. We're talking years ago, was it undervalued to the degree that it is today. So obviously it's fantastic to use something like Glassnode to take a look at the stock to flow ratio, understand what is likely to happen, look at that predictive model, see how it is doing. Also take a look at that deflection, right? And see how undervalued Bitcoin is, and it hasn't been down this low since pretty much 2011, right? So you're talking 10 years ago, Bitcoin was this undervalued, whereas you look at previous bull runs, it hasn't been pulled down this low. But this is a testament, guys, to the manipulation that is now here in the space. And again, when you actually take a look at the stock to flow model for something like gold, right, and you take a look at all those kind of metrics, and you start to think about how heavily manipulated those markets are, things are starting to align quite nicely for institutional level manipulation of Bitcoin. And again, you see this all over the place with the number of outflows increasing versus the number of inflows decreasing. We obviously see the number of wallets increasing, which hold more than 1,000 Bitcoin. And this is a vast number of whales. We've also seen, and what I believe to be one of the scare tactics recently used is whales actually putting Bitcoin onto the exchange, which can obviously be tracked, and then obviously triggers people to get scared that they're going to dump the Bitcoin. I don't think they actually are going to be dumping their Bitcoin. I think, in fact, those whales are using this as a tactic to shake out retail investors. So there's a lot going on in the space, guys. But for me personally, what I do to make sure that I keep my head in the game and understand exactly where we're going is I take a look at the daily chart. I take a look at these indicators that you have to physically put on there. They're not just readily available. You have to go search for them, find that stochastic relative strength index, throw it on your charts, take a look at it, and make your own assumptions as to what you think is likely to happen when you take a look at what's happened previously. You take a look at this on the daily chart, take a look at it on that weekly chart, right? And obviously draw those Elliott waves on, see what we can see here, draw on those Fibonacci retracement tools, have good expectations of where bounces are likely to go to. And again, take a look at that monthly view as well and get a good idea as to where things are likely to go in the second half of this year. And think about what you genuinely think is going to happen to that stochastic relative strength index if you were to drop down to $20,000 in the month of July. With that being said, guys, hopefully you found this brief update for Bitcoin useful and informative. If you have, hit the like button. I really do appreciate it. If you're new to the space, hit the subscribe button, tap on the bell, hit all notifications, and you won't miss another Bitcoin update. Guys, with this said, done, and out of the way, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.